All right, go for it.
How are you, man?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm seriously glad we got all this set up.
Me too. Man, it's great. I really hate that I am not going to be in Huntsville for work camp.
Yeah, man, me too.
I was looking forward to that when you called me back in February. That's crazy. It was like another world.
Yeah, it
In
feels
February.
like forever ago. I couldn't
winter-
even remember when.
It was Winterfest weekend. You were at Winterfest.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was doing whatever I do now that I don't go to Winterfest. But man, like, I'm pumped that we get to do this trip together.
Yeah, it's already been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been an adventure already. Just getting the fire built tonight was fun.
Uh-huh.
And setting up tent, fighting the rain.
Uh-huh.
And this is just the start of the journey.
Yeah.
The whole thing just kind of makes me think about, when you're going, talking about summits this week, right?
Right.
And we're just at the start of the journey and the importance of preparation to go on a trip like that.
Yeah.
Because when you think about, like when you hear the word walk, if I'm going to go for a walk, what do you think?
Not a hike for sure.
Yeah,
just down the street, sidewalk.
It's for exercise, right? I mean, you might enjoy it, but like if you're going for a walk, you're going, around the neighborhood. I'm going to walk to the store. It's not overly exciting. If you go for a hike, you go on an adventure, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you're going somewhere. Now, if you're going backpacking, like we are, you're going on a serious adventure. You're going somewhere it takes a while to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about summits this week, I just think about how it takes an effort, and we're going to talk more about that later. It takes an effort to get to a place that is worth getting to sometimes.
Right.
To get to a high place to be able to see out. And that takes effort, and it also takes preparation. And when I was kind of thinking through Jesus, I like to think about Jesus, and adventures that he went on. He had some pretty crazy ones that you and I will never experience.
Yeah.
But he had lived like 30 years, they think, when he started his ministry. Do you remember how he started his ministry before he ever went out and started healing people and teaching people and feeding people and all those, bringing people back from the dead, like all those crazy miracles he did.
Well, he changes water to wine. He does something at a wedding that he didn't even want to do.
Yeah, his mom was like, Jesus, you're going to do this. And he's like, Mom.
Yeah.
Whoa, Mom. But
Mom.
Come on. And by the way, this is because we're in front of a fire. I had a house fire a few months ago.
Yeah.
And it's either right before or right after you called me to do this. I think it was the week after.
I think it was, I called you to do this and then you had the fire.
And then I thought about it and I had the fire. I'm like, shoot, yeah, I'm going to Huntsville. Because right now, we're still living with my parents.
Yeah.
And as a 21-year-old guy like I am, I still have some moments, times two. I still have some moments where I go, Mom. And so, Jesus had this water and the wine moment, but like that wasn't really part of his official ministry.
Right.
In Luke 4, Jesus had this moment where he knew this journey was going to start to what would eventually, you think about his summit was going to be Calvary, up a hill. It wasn't for him that day a fantastic destination, but boy, the end result of it was amazing.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit more about that later too, but as he was getting ready to begin his journey, what Jesus did in Luke 4 was he decided to go away from the crowds, away from his disciples, by himself into the wilderness, kind of like what we're doing. And when he got in this wilderness, do you remember some of the things he did?
Yeah. Well, he's praying. And then he gets visited, which is odd to me. To me, it feels like one of the more supernatural moments in his ministry that he gets visited by Satan.
Yeah, Satan shows up. He's been praying. He's been fasting for 40 days. We ate, before we came on this trip, Mexican, and I hadn't been eating out a lot lately, and man, that was hard to eat.
Yeah.
But like 40 days going without any food, I don't know exactly how he did his fast, but that's crazy. And then Satan shows up to tempt him. And I think it's interesting, and you kind of pointed this out earlier, Rodney, that in that story, Satan takes him to a summit almost immediately.
Yeah.
But that wasn't his ultimate calling.
Yeah.
But when Satan took him up there, remember he had temptations that he threw at him. You know, basically the heart of those temptations were, look, Jesus, if you do what I ask you to do, if you turn against God, then I will give you all this right now.
Yeah.
And the reason he took him to a summit is so he could look out and see the majesty of the world, that basically Satan was saying, I'm promising this to you. And Jesus was prepared enough at that moment to respond to him with scripture saying, no, this is not what I'm called to.
Well, he says, I can give you all this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people hinge on, they hinge on well, Satan could only give it to him because Satan's the one that had the power, right? Satan, and I kind of feel like, well, no, that's a lie. Like, we know that's not true.
Yeah.
Even though it's an illusion, which is still the whole point of what Satan's doing. He takes him up on that high place and he says, look at all this. You don't have to, you're going to talk about this other summit later, right?
Yeah.
That you don't have to wait and make the journey to get to that summit. I can give you, like let's cut out the middleman. Let's forget all about that. You can have that now.
Right.
If jump down from this point, angels will catch you. Everyone will know who you are. Cut your ministry time, not just in half, but like now. It could be now.
Well, and not go through the suffering that
Yeah.
he knew he was put here to go through.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about death. I mean, that's obviously ultimately, man, I'd never wish my worst enemy to die the way Jesus died on a cross. But think about that 3 years from that moment, 3.5 years, however far it was, from that moment to his death, the number of times that people were ridiculing him. And people in his own town were like scoffing at him, basically,
Yeah.
not giving him credit for, being who he said he was. People really attacking, before he died, people wanting to come and take his life.
Yeah.
And so Satan was in essence saying, all of that's in front of you, I can take away and give you this immediate summit. And I think about that moment of preparation for him.
The fire's getting me, man.
Yeah, fire's got you, man.
It likes me.
It's going after you. What do they say? Smoke follows beauty.
Yeah, that's not true.
Yeah. But you remember later in his ministry, the people were so impressed with Jesus' miraculous acts and the way he took care of people that they wanted right then to take him and make him the king of the Jews and thus take over the Roman Empire.
Yep.
And politically take over. That was a moment of temptation that he'd been prepped for at his starting point.
Yeah.
In those 40 days. And so it makes me think, as we begin this journey physically, this hiking to a summit.
Right.
Man, I wish we were in Colorado.
Yeah,
You-
man.
you
Oh,
really-
dude, I was so I did get to, and I told my wife, I said, look, if I was having to do this all by myself, if I hadn't talked to Chris yet, if we hadn't planned this stuff out, I was like, I would be going to Colorado and I'd be hiking Pikes Peak right now.
I mean, work camp budget could have handled it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This year. Yeah.
But as we're getting ready to start this journey, it makes me think about a faith journey to a spiritual summit where we are with God and God is putting us in a position to be near to him.
Yeah.
But a faith journey is not always easy, as Jesus can tell us. And I think that there's a few things that from a starting point preparation standpoint, we need to be thinking about. And Paul had a couple of places, I mean more than two, but two that I kind of really honed in and thought about. One was in Philippians 4.
Mm-hmm.
And in Philippians 4, I'm going to get my handy dandy phone out because I left the Bible. I'll have it later.
Well, when I edit all this in post-production, the magic of cinema, we'll put the verse on the screen and nobody will see you read on your phone.
That's good. I shouldn't have talked about it. I'm such an amateur. In chapter 4, which is toward the end of Philippians, after he's given the Philippians some challenges to live by, Paul, by the way, writing this from prison, is in the midst of a definite trial. Gives this calling to them. It says in my version of exhortation, like encouragement. It says, rejoice in the Lord always, and I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And I think from Paul's conversation here, there's a couple of things I would like to pull out to say is so key in your faith journey from a preparation standpoint. And one is that you have to have a right focus.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, writing from prison, says, rejoice in the Lord in everything. Be prepared to let your God-focused attention be seen. And when you're in your faith journey, it can be easy to get knocked down, to be set back, to have things happen, whether it's from a friend who doesn't think that following Jesus is something you should do, or maybe a parent, or maybe just own doubts. Maybe something happens to another friend that it's hard for you to deal with, or something happens in your family, or you get in the middle of a pandemic and you are depressed about that and you're going to have tough times. Paul from prison said, get your mind in the right place where you are focusing and rejoicing in the Lord. Because on this journey, you're going to need some focus.
Well, and he's isolated just like we are now. I mean, if you take that metaphor of pandemic and apply it to, talk about being isolated, being alone, not being able to get out, seeing the same people day to day, going through the same routine, apply that to prison, he's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It's self-imposed right now, but look on Facebook, look on Instagram, look at Twitter, and people, even though it's self-imposed, they're wrestling with the idea of, well, why do we have to do this? Why should we have to do this? And what always gets me is the people that you can tell by their Facebook comments, they're okay going out unmasked. They're okay going out and sit in a restaurant, crowded people, Walmart, all those kind of things. But they post about it and talk about, well, government can't make you do this, and you can do that, and you can do this. And I just want to ask them, like, okay, do you want to go out? Do you think it's okay? And I know they'd say yes. And then my question would be, then why are you asking everybody else to do it? Why do you want people to follow you in it? And it's still a form of isolation.
Yeah.
And you're talking about Paul in prison. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but when even guys in prison get together and form like cliques and form and try to find some semblance of reality, even though they know they're stuck someplace that they can't get out of. They try to make the best of their situation, even though it's rough, and they find ways to get around the system. They find ways to make it comfortable. And Paul is in the midst of one of those moments where he could easily fall into that and blame everybody and everything, and rightly so, for where he's at.
Yeah.
And he's the one telling people that are literally free, hey, you need to get your mind right. You need to I've got perspective where I'm at, and you need to get what I've got, because he's the one that's got true freedom, and I'm locked in a room.
Yeah, I don't want to hear your complaints.
Yeah.
I mean, that must be we had our house fire, and then the next week, 10 days later in Nashville, where I live. By the way, I'm Chris. Maybe you'll introduce me.
I will.
10 days after our fire, or 12 days, is when the tornadoes hit Nashville. And I'm sure it made the news in Huntsville.
Yeah.
But it ripped through East Nashville, through a heavily populated, high-value area, densely populated.
Yeah.
Somehow didn't kill more people than it did. And then it got out into more kind of East Tennessee and really caused a lot more destruction and body count harm, which is obviously more important than a house.
Yeah.
To people out there, because they didn't have the sirens and as much warning. And I kind of, after that happened, was like, man, this makes my fire look like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And someone that I was talking to about that said something really, I think, really impactful to me. And they said, just because that might have been bigger, it doesn't make your pain any less.
Right.
It doesn't make your hurt any less. And so there's real pain, regardless if it's Paul in prison or somebody walking through something else. But despite all that, we look for what is joyful. I heard a preacher a few weeks ago preaching this passage, and he said one of the things that we need to do in our tough times is to go ahead and thank God for how he's going to solve it.
Yep.
and it helps us keep that positive focus.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, something real quick before you read your verse, and you're talking about putting it in perspective. I think a lot of times in church we want to make our journey seem more impressive. We want to make our pain seem more impressive because it makes it feel like God's doing more, or like somehow we're more holy or we're more righteous because of how much pain we endured, and how I've come through it, or that's what makes it okay for me to be the way I am.
Yeah.
And so, it's like, you're talking about going to Colorado. I've been up the Bar Trail. I've tried to hike Pikes Peak twice.
Yeah.
And I have driven up to the top, but I have never hiked all the way to the top. I made it to 12,000 feet out of 14,000 once, and I made it to 10,000 feet out of 14,000. Both times got snowed in and had to turn around. The views were breathtaking. It was amazing. The journey was hard, but I did not make it to the summit. I did not see that journey through to completion, and it was still amazing and beautiful. And Lord willing, we're going to take a journey that by all accounts is definitely easier. No high altitudes. The breathing is going to be easier, except for the smoke in my face. But I'm confident that we'll see the summit.
Right.
And that's also the cool thing about that Pikes Peak Trail. I know, which is kind of cool, is I've driven to the top. I've seen the summit. I've seen the peak. And so for me to hike that, it's not about seeing that summit. It's about that journey.
Yeah.
And I think when Paul's talking about his pain, and you're talking about, well, is my fire any less important, or is my pain in perspective with this tornado stuff? So that means I shouldn't talk about my pain. I shouldn't have to work through my pain. I should just go, it's okay. No, even Paul is saying, look, I know you've got pain. I've got pain too. But the thing that I've found in the midst of my pain is something you can find in the midst of yours too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that mindset keeps you going.
Yeah.
The other thing he shares just below that is, he says this: finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. So if you're wondering what you're supposed to think about, Paul's telling you.
Yeah.
This helps you be rejoiceful. Whatever is admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice.
Yeah.
And the God of peace will be with you.
That's his follow me as I follow Christ, but
Right.
with a list, right?
Right. It doesn't mean that whatever that hurt was, whatever that thing that's going to get in your way, that it's going to go away, but it means that God is walking with you through it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's interesting. He doesn't say just do this, think about it and be done. He says do this and then put it into practice.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing you have to be doing before you ever start your hike. Your hike at Pikes Peak would have not gotten turned around by snow at 10 and 12,000 feet had you spent the previous 6 months before you did that hike sitting in front of the TV watching other people hike.
Yeah.
My son is 7. His name is Hudson. He's the most adorable thing in the world. He loves Legos. He wants to do a YouTube Lego channel.
Asher's into Minecraft. He wants a YouTube Minecraft.
And I'm just like, no, we're not. And he goes, but they get free Legos. I'm like, no. But he will sit and watch 2 things on YouTube all day long. Other kids making Lego sets and amusement park rides. We don't have to go to Universal Studios because he knows every ride by sitting and watching it on YouTube. Yeah. But he's never had the experience unless he goes and does it.
Right.
When you're preparing for a hike, I think ours that we're doing, because we don't have time to go do anything more, grand, I think would be relatively easy for most people watching this. There might be some exceptions, but if you're going to go do a real journey, you have got to put into practice and be trained.
Yeah.
You have got to do the things to be ready. You've got to be eating correctly. You've got to be getting out and exercising.
Yep.
You've got to be doing the things that's going to get you ready to put into practice so that when you leave base camp, it's not your first time putting on your hiking boots, because you probably experienced this. If the first time you put on your hiking boots are the start of a 5 to 10 mile day,
yep.
you're going to regret that that's the
Yep.
first day you put on those boots.
Well, I even exercised when I got, I did workouts and exercise beforehand, but I did exercise when I got to Colorado
Right.
Springs because the altitude's so different. I had to exercise in that environment because my lungs and my heart were. It didn't matter how much exercise I had done at home. It was a different environment there, and exercising in that environment was that much different. And I did watch videos. I did listen and read things about how to hike in high altitudes and what that's like, and I had people tell me. But until you get in it and you experience it, learning how to breathe different, learning how to walk different, and realizing that it's okay to take breaks.
Yeah.
I felt like I was doing something wrong because I was taking a break. And even the guy that was with me who lived there and had done it hundreds of times said, yeah, we're going to have to stop. And it's not just you. We're going to have to stop.
Isn't it amazing that the God we follow calls us to have Sabbath and we totally ignore it?
Yeah.
We're like, oh, it's an Old Testament thing. It's like, no, the God we are following, the God that provides peace, says, you need a time to take a break.
Well, even he did it too.
Yeah, he did it after 6 incredible days.
The being that can make things with a word
And
said,
then-
I'm going to take a break.
Well, and on that 7th day, don't you think he kind of sat back on his summit and just watched?
Mm-hmm.
This is good.
Yeah.
Like
he even
he
says
rested.
it 6 times.
He rested. Well, we've talked about the pandemic some, but I'm going to tell you there's some things that I wish we would, and we won't do it as a society because commercials will tell us not to. There's been some things that we've slowed down on that are really good during this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that, our earth is healed in the last 3 months. But if we did another, not saying we should, but,
Yeah.
there's other factors. But, man, if we would just learn to take some breaks, maybe the earth could catch up with some of the damage it's got.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe our families could catch up with some of the damage from just being exhausted all
Yep.
the time. And maybe we wouldn't be so stressed out if we rested. And that's a good point that you're talking about, taking those breaks on your journey. You've got to learn to do that. So watching the videos is important because you're learning what to do.
Yeah,
But
that's that preparation that you're talking
then
about.
you got to go put it into practice.
Yep. That's all that preparation that we're so worried about getting to the next step that we don't enjoy the step we're on.
Right.
And the preparation is just as important as anything else you're going to do on the journey.
Yeah. Your faith is a journey, not
Yeah.
a destination.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds really cliche, but it's true.
It's true.
The last thing I'm going to talk about, and I'll do this pretty quickly, because I'm sure everyone's just excited about listening for a long time to me talk. The other thing that I think is key, and Paul talks about this in Ephesians 6, is that we have the right gear. And you might have been able to tell from our little Zoom setup, getting ready to come on the trip, that I was going to be a little overpacked.
I caught that.
I don't backpack like you do, man. I grew up in the mountains. I told Rodney this earlier. You can walk out my back deck and in 45 minutes be at the tallest mountaintop in my town in western North Carolina and see 14 mountain ranges into Georgia and Tennessee. So I grew up in the mountains, and I could go without even thinking and walk an hour, and I love that. But, man, I haven't done it. I haven't kept up with practice with that like you have. But you've got to have the right gear.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be able to have the right amount of gear. You don't want to be overpacked. You don't want to be lugging a bunch of extra weight. That's true spiritually as well.
Yep.
But you also want to make sure you have the right thing, right? I would say, tell me if I'm wrong on this. When you're hiking, you need the right shoes,
Yep.
boots. You need to have dry, good socks.
Yeah.
You need to have protection from
The elements.
the elements, a tent, but you don't want to carry you can't carry an RV camper,
Yep.
right? I mean, if you drive to the top, you can. But if you're backpacking, you need something that's lightweight, but it's going to protect you,
Yep.
right? You need to have the right kind of food. You can't carry, if you're backpacking for a long distance, a kerosene, comb and grill on your back. But boy, you need good proteins and good carbohydrates, and you need to hydrate your body with water. But that's just to ask you a question, since you do this more than me. So we know we need to stay hydrated anytime we're exercising, or just really all the time. There's your public service announcement. But when you're backpacking and hiking and getting to a summit, we need hydration. But if I come and pull out a 36 pack of Costco water on my back, that's too much. Like, how do you do that?
I took You take a couple of bottles of water with you, but really it's just having the right types of bottles. Stuff with carabiners that you can carry on your pack, something you can carry in your hand. I mean, sometimes you're carrying hiking poles and things like that, and so you can't. But knowing how far you have to go and packing enough water for the journey, and knowing that there might be places you can stop to get water on the way. And that's part of the preparation, for sure.
Yeah, because you're going to pack by the preparation. If you're going to do a 4-hour day hike one day to get to a really pretty summit, once again, I grew up in North Carolina. Mount Mitchell is a beautiful summit. It's the highest point east of Mississippi. You can go do that and you can drive almost all the way to the top, and then you hike a little bit and you're at the top of the highest point east of Mississippi. That's different than the preparation for the Appalachian Trail, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so knowing what you're preparing for helps you pack. But spiritually, at the end of chapter 6 in Ephesians, the very end of that chapter, this is always one of my favorites as a kid. Paul talks about the armor of God, right? The things that we need to be fitted with. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood. This is a spiritual journey, not a physical one. This is kind of scary if you listen to it. But against the rulers and against the authorities and against the powers of this dark world and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. When Paul's talking about putting on this spiritual armor, it is against battles against a person, a Satan, who does not want you to get to the ultimate summit to be with God. He wants to sidetrack you. Mm-hmm. And he will use any means possible. And he says, therefore, put on that full armor, so that when he comes at you, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, with your feet fitted with readiness. You have the right boots that come from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation. We don't get there without Jesus. Mm-hmm. We don't get to the summit without Jesus. And the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. You got to know the Word of God, both from the Bible and from hearing other people's teaching. And pray on all occasions. Mm-hmm. As we prepare to leave base camp, to go on this journey to the summit, we must have our right mind focused on God. We must have the right preparation, the right practice, and we must know what to pack and to wear to make that journey successful. And Paul closes Ephesians by saying, pray in all circumstances. Rodney, over the next couple of days, I hope that the groups and the families and the individuals that are doing service in Huntsville, not just this week, but every week, will be doing it with a heart that is reaching toward a summit. But I'm also going to challenge you to do this. At night when you come back from wherever you're going to be serving, and I think you already encouraged this, pray over the people you've been with. Pray over the work that you're doing, not so that you can be shown as great, but because we want Jesus to be seen in what's being done, so that other people can get glimpses of who Jesus is by the work we do on the way to the summit.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I'm looking forward to our journey. I'm looking forward to what the summit looks like. I'm looking forward to what our students are going to be doing each and every day, and just seeing, because it's new territory. I mean, just like our journey is, our physical journey, each step will be a new step towards something that we can't imagine yet. I think doing work camp in the middle of the pandemic is a new journey for everybody, and learning how to serve and be like Jesus in the midst of this is going to be a crazy adventure.
Yeah, it will be. So. Hope you guys have a great day tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow night. I promise I won't go this long every night. But, man, this was good stuff. Yeah. I'm glad we got to talk. Glad we're getting to hang out here.
Yeah, man.
Getting ready to start this journey together, man.
Let's go to bed.
Let's do it.
I'm ready. All right.